Millionaire found a nurse crying with her twin baby in a hospital, unaware she'd lost everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Emily sat quietly in the corner of the bustling hospital ward, her eyes red from crying. Her twin babies lay beside her, swaddled in their tiny blankets. She had always dreamed of becoming a nurse, of helping others, but today, she felt defeated. It was hard to keep going when it felt like the world was against her. The weight of responsibility, both as a mother and a caregiver, was overwhelming. As a nurse, she had seen countless patients come and go, but this time, it was different. This time, she was the one in need. The hospital, once a place of hope and healing, now felt like a cold, indifferent institution. Emily's heart ached as she looked down at her babies. The bills had piled up, her rent was overdue, and her savings had long since run dry. It seemed like every door was closing, leaving her with no way out. She had no family to turn to for help, no partner to lean on. She was alone. As the hours dragged on, Emily's thoughts spiraled deeper into despair. She tried to focus on the babies, but her mind kept wandering back to the financial strain she was under. The hospital had been kind enough to let her keep her job for now, but with her health deteriorating, she knew it wouldn't be long before she'd be forced to leave. She wiped her tears away, trying to gather the strength to carry on. Just then, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was the CEO of the hospital, Mr. Grant Carter. Emily had heard his name whispered by the staff, but she had never seen him up close. He was tall, with dark hair and a sharp, commanding presence. He looked every bit the part of a powerful businessman, but there was something different about him today. He wasn't just the man who ran the hospital. Today, he was just another person, walking into the room with an air of concern. He looked at Emily and her babies with soft eyes, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Emily quickly wiped her face, embarrassed by the sudden attention. "I'm fine," she muttered, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Grant stepped closer, his gaze lingering on the twins. "You've been here for a while, haven't you?" Emily nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "It's been tough." There was a brief silence as Grant took a moment to process her words. He had been used to seeing the nurses and doctors working tirelessly, but something about Emily's situation seemed different. He had always been focused on the hospital's success, on the numbers, on the bottom line. But today he saw something more. He saw a woman who had been pushed to the brink, struggling to hold it all together. "I know it's not much, but is there anything I can do to help?" he asked, his voice softer now. Emily looked up, shocked by the sincerity in his tone. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't even know what I need anymore." Grant could sense her pain, but he didn't know how to fix it. As he stood there, he realized that he couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could help her find a way forward. "Let me help you," he said, his words more than just an offer. They were a promise. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Emily looked at him, uncertain but hopeful. She had no idea how her life was about to change, but one thing was clear: someone had finally seen her. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Emily woke up the next morning with a strange sense of uncertainty hanging in the air. She had no idea what to expect from the promise that Grant Carter had made the night before. After a long night of tossing and turning, her mind racing with thoughts of the future, she found herself at a crossroads. The same hospital she had worked at for years, where she had given so much of herself, was now where her life could take a completely different turn. But how could she trust someone like him? He was a millionaire, the CEO of the very hospital that had hired her. How could a man like him really understand what she was going through? Yet, there was something in his eyes that had spoken to her, something that made her believe he might truly want to help. She couldn't ignore the fact that he had seen her, really seen her, in a way that no one had before. She thought back to the conversation they'd had last night. His words were so simple, yet so full of meaning. "Let me help you." She had wanted to refuse, to keep her distance, but his presence was like a quiet force that made her feel safe, even for just a moment. As Emily stood up from her bed, she glanced at her twins, still asleep in their cribs, their tiny faces peaceful and serene. It broke her heart to think that she couldn't give them the life she wanted. But she had to keep going for them. She had to find a way to provide. She couldn't let them see the hopelessness that threatened to consume her. After breakfast, she sent the twins to daycare and prepared herself for work, unsure of what to expect. Her shift at the hospital began, and as she entered the staff lounge, she was greeted by her coworkers, but the tension was palpable. They had heard about the encounter with Grant Carter. Rumors had already begun to spread, whispers about what had happened, and some of her colleagues were eager to know more. Emily smiled politely, avoiding the questions. She wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. It wasn't until later that afternoon that she saw him again. Grant walked through the hospital corridors with a purposeful stride, his presence commanding attention from everyone around him. As he spotted Emily, he gave her a subtle nod, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. He approached her with a calm confidence that made her feel both small and important at the same time. "I've spoken with the board," he said, his voice steady. "We've come up with a plan to support you." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I've arranged for your debt to be covered," he explained. "And I've set up a temporary position here at the hospital, something that will allow you to work and focus on your family. You don't have to worry about losing your job." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to protest, to ask why he was doing this for her, but the words caught in her throat. She had never been the kind of person to accept charity. "But why?" she finally asked. "Why me?" Grant looked at her for a moment, his eyes softening. "Because I believe you deserve more than what you've been given. You've been working here tirelessly, and you've made a difference in so many lives. I want to give you a chance to change your own." Emily was stunned. She had never expected something like this. A part of her wanted to pull away, to tell him she didn't need help, but deep down, she knew she had no choice. She had to take this chance. She had to keep moving forward for her babies. That evening, as she returned to her apartment, Emily's mind was in a whirlwind. She stood at the doorway for a long time, unsure of what to do next. She had been given a lifeline, but would she be able to grasp it without losing herself in the process? The twins were waiting for her inside, their tiny faces lighting up when they saw her. She smiled, kneeling down to hug them. At that moment, she knew one thing for sure. She would do whatever it took to give them a better life. The next day, Emily met with Grant again, this time in his office. He had arranged for her to start in a new position at the hospital, one where she would be able to focus on her work and her family without the constant fear of losing everything. She had no idea what the future held, but she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The following week, Emily found herself standing in the hospital lobby, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. It was her first official day in her new role, and while part of her felt a glimmer of hope, another part was unsure of what to expect. The promise that Grant had made to help her felt surreal, like something out of a dream. She had never imagined that someone in his position, someone so distant from her life, would care enough to offer a lifeline. But here she was, with a new opportunity, and she couldn't afford to let it slip away. She glanced at the clock on the wall, her heart racing. Her shift was about to start, and she had a new sense of purpose. But with that sense of purpose came a heavy burden. How long could she keep pretending that everything was fine? The weight of her responsibilities as a mother and a nurse still loomed over her. As she entered the staff room, her coworkers greeted her with smiles and kind words, though she noticed the subtle glances, the curiosity behind their expressions. Word had spread that Emily had received special treatment from Grant, and there was no denying the tension in the air. She did her best to push it aside, focusing on the tasks at hand. Her first shift in the new role was a whirlwind. There were patients to tend to, medications to administer, and paperwork that never seemed to end. But amid the busyness, Emily found a small sense of peace. She was doing something that mattered, something that gave her a purpose beyond just surviving. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel like she was contributing, that her work had meaning. During her break, Emily sat down in the staff lounge, exhausted but relieved. The past few days had been a blur, and she was grateful for a moment of calm. As she sipped her coffee, she couldn't help but think about Grant. She had only seen him a handful of times since their initial meeting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than just being the CEO of the hospital. There was a softness to him, a quiet understanding that had left a lasting impression. She had heard rumors about his personal life, about how he had built his empire alone, with little regard for anything beyond business. But when she looked at him, she didn't see the ruthless businessman. She saw a man who was trying to make a difference in a world that often seemed indifferent. As if on cue, Grant walked into the lounge, his eyes meeting hers. There was no mistaking the warmth in his gaze. He smiled as he approached, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something gentler. "How's your first day going?" he asked, his voice calm and reassuring. Emily smiled back, though she felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. "It's been busy but good. Thank you, again, for everything." Grant nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've earned this opportunity, Emily. I can see that already." She felt a pang in her chest. "I don't know if I've earned it. I'm just doing what I can to survive." Grant's gaze softened, and for a moment, it felt as though time stood still. Surviving is only half the battle. The other half is living. And you're doing that, even when it's hard. Emily's breath caught in her throat. His words, simple but true, struck a chord deep within her. She had been so focused on just making it through each day that she had forgotten what it meant to live. To truly live, not just survive. That evening, as Emily returned home, she reflected on Grant's words. She had always thought that if she could just keep going, just keep fighting, everything would eventually fall into place. But now, for the first time, she wondered if there was more to life than just getting by. She had been given a second chance, not just to survive, but to thrive. And with that realization, she made a promise to herself. She would no longer live in the shadow of her past struggles. She would live for her children, for her own happiness, and for the future she had yet to build. The next day, she saw Grant again, this time in his office. He was discussing hospital matters with his team, but when he saw Emily standing in the doorway, he excused himself and walked over to her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice full of genuine concern. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a newfound sense of clarity. "I'm feeling better," she said, her voice steady. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. It's not just about surviving. It's about living." Grant's eyes softened, and he smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." Emily smiled back, feeling for the first time in a long while that maybe, just maybe, she could finally start living again. As the weeks went by, Emily slowly adjusted to her new role at the hospital. Each day, she grew more confident, but she also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The opportunity that Grant had given her felt like a second chance, one she wasn't sure she deserved, but one she couldn't afford to waste. She worked tirelessly, balancing her job with caring for her twin babies. There were days when the exhaustion was overwhelming, when she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going. But there was something different now, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She began to see the small victories in her life. Every time she finished a shift and went home to her babies, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Every smile from her coworkers, every kind word from her patients, reminded her that she was making a difference. But the greatest reward was the connection she was starting to form with Grant. They had seen each other only in passing, their conversations brief, but every time they spoke, Emily felt a deeper sense of trust growing between them. It wasn't just about the help he had offered her. It was about the way he saw her, the way he respected her. She began to understand that Grant was not just the CEO of the hospital. He was a man who had faced his own struggles, someone who had worked hard to build something meaningful, just like her. One afternoon, as Emily was leaving work, she saw Grant standing by the entrance, waiting for her. His usual professional demeanor was gone, replaced by a softer, more approachable look. "Hey, Emily," he greeted her with a smile. "I was hoping to catch you before you left." Emily felt a flutter in her chest. "What's up?" she asked, trying to hide her surprise. Grant stepped closer, his tone more personal than usual. "I've been thinking about what you said, about living, not just surviving. I realize I've been so focused on running the hospital that I've forgotten what it means to truly live." Emily looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "It's not easy," she said, her voice soft. "But I think you're right. Life's about more than just pushing through the hard times." Grant nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you." I've been working on a new project, one that focuses on helping people in situations like yours, people who need a chance to start over. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What kind of project? She asked, intrigued. Grant smiled. I'm starting a foundation. It's going to provide financial support, job training, and opportunities for people who've been through hardships. And I want you to be a part of it. Emily stared at him, unsure if she had heard him right. You want me to be a part of your foundation? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Grant nodded. Yes, I think you have a lot to offer. You've shown so much strength, and I know you can help others who are struggling. Emily was speechless. This wasn't just about a job or money anymore. This was an opportunity to make a real impact, to help others in a way she had always wanted. I don't know what to say, she finally managed. Grant placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to say anything right now. Just think about it. I know you've been through a lot, but I believe in you, Emily. I always have. His words hit her harder than she expected. For the first time, she realized that this wasn't just a professional connection. It was a genuine bond, a bond that had the power to change both their lives. As Emily walked to her car that evening, her mind raced. She had been given so many chances, but this was different. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, about building something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could do something extraordinary. The next morning, Emily met with Grant at the hospital. He had arranged a meeting to discuss the foundation, and as she sat across from him, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was her chance to not only change her life, but to change the lives of others who needed it most. She smiled, knowing that whatever happened next, she was no longer just surviving. She was finally living. Emily's first week with the new foundation passed in a whirlwind of activity. Every day, she felt more connected to the mission and more determined to help those in need. Grant had made it clear from the start that this was not just another charity project. It was a movement, aimed at lifting people out of poverty, out of their struggles, and giving them a chance to rebuild. Emily had been hired as the community outreach coordinator, a position she never imagined she'd hold. She spent her days meeting with people from all walks of life, single mothers, veterans, those struggling with addiction, and every story she heard fueled her desire to do more. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging meeting with a woman who had lost her home and her job, Emily found herself sitting in her office, her hands trembling as she reviewed notes. She was used to seeing pain and hardship, but each new story seemed to touch her heart more deeply than the last. She thought back to her own struggles, the sleepless nights, the uncertainty, the fear of not being able to provide for her children. She had come so far, but there was still so much to do. As she sat there, lost in thought, the door opened, and Grant walked in, his presence as commanding as ever, but there was something softer about him now. He had been to several meetings that morning, but he made a point to check in with her. How's everything going? He asked, his tone warm, concerned. Emily smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. It's good. A lot of work, but it feels right. I'm starting to see real change in people. Grant nodded, his eyes focused on her. I knew you were the right person for this. Emily felt a warmth spread through her at his words. She had spent so long doubting herself, unsure of her worth, but now, hearing him say this, she realized just how far she had come. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't think I could have done any of this without your help. Grant took a step closer to her, his expression thoughtful. I'm glad I could help, but this is all you, Emily. You've got something special, a way of reaching people, of making them believe in themselves again. His words hit her like a wave. She had always doubted her own abilities, but hearing this from him made her see herself in a new light. She had been more than just a nurse, more than just a mother trying to survive. She was a force of change, and with Grant's support, she was beginning to believe she could make a real difference in the world. The following week, Grant invited her to an event for the foundation. It was a gala to raise funds for the new projects they were working on, and though Emily had never been comfortable in such formal settings, she agreed to attend. As the evening approached, she found herself standing in front of her mirror, unsure of what to wear. She had always felt out of place in these kinds of environments, but she knew she had to push past that. This was her chance to show that she belonged, that she was capable of more than just surviving. She chose a simple but elegant dress, one that made her feel confident and comfortable. When she arrived at the venue, she was greeted by Grant, who was dressed in his usual sharp suit. But there was a difference in the way he looked at her. There was no longer just the formality of a CEO and an employee. There was a warmth, an unspoken understanding. "You look stunning," he said with a smile. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little shaky. The night was filled with speeches, introductions, and moments of quiet reflection. As the event went on, Emily found herself talking to people from all walks of life: donors, volunteers, other people involved in the foundation. They all seemed to believe in the cause, to believe in her. She had never felt more at home. But it wasn't until later in the evening, as the gala was winding down, that something unexpected happened. Grant pulled her aside, away from the crowd. "Emily, I've been thinking," he began, his tone serious. She looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "About what?" "About what you've been doing with the foundation, and how much it means to so many people." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I want you to know that I'm not just offering you a job. I'm offering you a partnership." Emily blinked, surprised. "A partnership?" she echoed. Grant nodded. "Yes. I want you to be my partner in this work, in this foundation. You're not just a coordinator. You're someone who's truly making a difference, and I want you by my side as we build something bigger than both of us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. This was more than she had ever hoped. A partnership? With him? It was a dream she had never allowed herself to dream, and now it was coming true. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: she was no longer just surviving. She was living, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of new changes for Emily. As Grant's partner in the foundation, her responsibilities grew exponentially. No longer just a coordinator, she found herself at the helm of new projects, managing both the outreach efforts and the partnerships that would make the foundation's vision a reality. She worked tirelessly, but with each passing day, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment that had been absent from her life for so long. The more she put into the foundation, the more she saw the impact it had on the lives of those they helped. It wasn't just about the financial support anymore. It was about giving people hope. She was no longer just surviving, but actively creating change. Despite the success and the growth of the foundation, there were still moments of doubt. There were days when Emily wondered if she was truly worthy of this opportunity. She had always been the one to fight for survival, the one who kept pushing even when everything seemed impossible. Now, she was living a life she had once thought was out of reach. The balance between work and home was tough, especially as her twins continued to grow. But Emily found strength in her role as both a mother and a leader. She would spend her days in meetings, talking to donors, and coordinating new programs. But every evening, she would come home to her children. They were her heart and soul, and they gave her the strength to keep going. One afternoon, Grant called her into his office. He had been working on a new project for the foundation, and he wanted her input. As she sat down across from him, she couldn't help but feel a growing connection between them. Over the months they had worked together, Emily had begun to see Grant in a different light. He wasn't just the CEO of the hospital anymore. He had become someone she admired, someone who was genuinely committed to making a difference. "Emily," Grant began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about the future of the foundation. We've made a lot of progress, but there's still so much more we can do." He paused, looking at her with a mix of admiration and something deeper. "You've been incredible in this role. I can't imagine doing any of this without you." Emily felt her heart flutter. She had heard Grant praise her before, but there was something different in the way he said it now. It wasn't just professional admiration. It was something more personal. "Thank you," she replied softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "I'm just doing my part." But Grant's gaze lingered on her, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink. There was an undeniable tension between them, something unspoken, yet heavy in the air. "I don't think you realize just how much you've changed everything here," Grant continued, his voice softer now. "Not just the foundation, but me too. You've shown me what it means to care about something beyond just business." Emily blinked, unsure of what to say. She hadn't expected this conversation to take such a turn. "Grant, But before she could finish, Grant interrupted her, standing up and walking around the desk toward her. "I've never been one to let opportunities slip by," he said, his voice low. "And right now, I see an opportunity to do something more than just work together. Emily, I don't know how to say this, but I think you and I— He stopped, taking a deep breath, as if choosing his words carefully. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had never imagined that their professional relationship could turn into something more. But as Grant stood before her, his expression vulnerable for the first time, she realized that maybe there was something real between them. "Grant," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of confusion and hope. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Grant took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "Yes," he said simply, "I think I am." The words hung in the air between them, and Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had spent so much time focusing on surviving, on building her life back up from the ground, that she hadn't allowed herself to consider what it meant to truly live. And now, standing in front of her was the man who had helped her see that, the man who was offering her a chance at something more than just survival. The next few moments felt like a dream. Emily didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. Together, they had built something powerful, a foundation that could change lives. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something even more beautiful together. As the evening drew to a close, Emily walked out of Grant's office, her heart racing, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to see where this new journey might take her. The days that followed felt like a blur for Emily. She had never imagined that her life would change so dramatically, and as much as she tried to wrap her head around it, it was hard to believe that she was here, standing alongside Grant, working together not just for the foundation, but for something deeper, something more personal. But as the weeks went by, Emily started to feel the weight of her new role, not just in the foundation, but in the relationship that was beginning to take shape between her and Grant. There were moments of doubt, of course. She had always kept her emotions guarded, and now she was learning how to navigate the complexities of opening up, trusting someone with not only her heart, but her dreams. Her mind often raced with questions. Was this too much too soon? Was she ready for this? She had always been self-sufficient, taking care of herself and her children, and now, she was being asked to trust someone else, to lean on them for support, both personally and professionally. It wasn't easy. One evening, as Emily worked late at the office, Grant appeared in the doorway. He had been out all day, handling meetings with potential donors, but tonight, he seemed different, distracted, almost distant. Emily looked up from her papers, her eyes meeting his. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft, noticing the tension in his posture. Grant hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," he said, his tone absent. "I've been thinking about how much we've accomplished so far, but also how much more we need to do." Emily nodded, understanding the pressure he was under. She, too, had been feeling the weight of the work ahead. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something deeper, a vulnerability that she hadn't seen before. "Is it just about the foundation?" she asked, setting her pen down. Grant took a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words. "It's everything," he said, his voice quieter now. "The foundation is important, but it's more than that. It's about finding balance. And, honestly, about finding something real in all of this." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had felt the connection between them growing stronger, but she hadn't known if he felt the same way. She had kept her distance, unsure of how to approach the situation. But now, hearing his words, she realized that he was just as uncertain as she was. "Grant," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, for everything. I've been through so much, and I don't want to risk losing what we've built." Grant's eyes softened, and he walked closer to her, his presence comforting yet intense. "I understand, Emily," he said, his voice filled with understanding. "I know it's not easy, but I believe in what we're doing here, and I believe in you. I'm not asking for everything all at once. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Emily felt her chest tighten as she looked up at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never had someone offer her that kind of support, that kind of commitment. For so long, she had been on her own, fighting to survive. But now, standing here with Grant, she felt like she was being given a chance to truly live. She took a deep breath, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't know what the future holds, Grant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but I think I'm ready to take that chance. With you. Grant smiled softly, his eyes filled with warmth. We'll take it one step at a time, Emily. Together. In that moment, everything felt clearer. The doubt that had clouded her mind for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of certainty that she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a partner, someone who believed. In her, in them, and in what they could accomplish together. As Emily walked home that evening, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had no idea what the future would bring, but she was no longer afraid to face it. Whatever came next, she knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. The days following their conversation were filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Emily had made the decision to take a chance on her future, on Grant, and on their shared mission. Together, they were building something meaningful, something that not only impacted the lives of others, but also brought them closer. But with every step forward, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. She had always been the one to keep her guard up, to protect herself and her children from the pain that seemed to follow them. But now, in this new chapter of her life, she found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. At the hospital, the foundation, and even at home, things felt like they were shifting. Emily and Grant continued to work side by side, making incredible strides with the foundation. They had expanded their outreach, helped more families, and provided new opportunities to those who had none. The partnership they had developed in business was beginning to feel like something more personal, and Emily couldn't deny that she was starting to feel more than just admiration for Grant. But despite the growing connection, there were still moments of hesitation. Emily had never been one to lean on others, especially not in matters of the heart. She didn't know how to navigate these unfamiliar feelings, and at times, she found herself questioning what was real and what was just a result of everything they had been through together. One evening, Grant invited her to dinner at his penthouse. It wasn't an event for the foundation, nor was it a meeting. It was simply a quiet dinner between the two of them. Emily felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension as she prepared for the evening. She had never imagined herself in a place like this, and the thought of spending an intimate evening with Grant made her feel both nervous and excited. When she arrived, she was greeted with a warm smile and the scent of a delicious meal. Grant had gone out of his way to make the evening feel special, and as they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily. For the first time in a while, Emily felt at peace. As the night went on, Emily realized that this wasn't just a dinner. It was an opportunity to connect with Grant on a deeper level. They talked about everything: life, their dreams, their fears, and it felt as though the walls between them were slowly crumbling. At one point, after they had finished their meal, Grant leaned back in his chair, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Emily," he said softly, "I know we've been working together for a while now, but I want to be honest with you about something. The way I feel about you, it's not just professional. I've grown to care for you, in ways I never expected." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had sensed it, of course, the connection between them, but hearing him say it out loud was different. "Grant, I don't know what to say," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been through so much, and I don't want to mess this up. I've never been good at trusting people, especially not with my heart." Grant reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "You don't have to say anything, Emily. I understand. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just want you to know that I care about you, and I want to be here for you, in whatever way you need." Emily looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. She had spent so long guarding her heart, afraid to let anyone in, but here was Grant, offering her something she had never dared to dream of: support, understanding, and something deeper than just a business partnership. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a quiet promise, one that neither of them had to speak out loud. After a long pause, Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm ready to take that chance. With you." Grant's smile was soft and genuine. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "And whatever happens, we'll take it one step at a time." As the evening continued, Emily felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that the future could be something beautiful, something worth fighting for. As she left Grant's penthouse that night, she walked with a renewed sense of hope. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, she was excited to find out. As the months passed, Emily felt her life transform in ways she never thought possible. The foundation had grown beyond anything she could have imagined, and her work with Grant had created a new purpose for her. She no longer felt like she was just surviving. She was living, truly living, with the love and support of those who had once seemed so far out of reach. The connection between her and Grant had deepened, but it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about everything they had built together, the people they were helping, the lives they were changing. Their work had become a symbol of hope, and every day brought new possibilities. As Emily stood in the hospital lobby one afternoon, looking out the window at the busy city, she thought about everything that had brought her here. She thought about the woman she had been just a year ago, broken, struggling, unsure of her future, and how far she had come since then. The weight of her past no longer felt like a burden. It was part of her story, a story of strength, resilience, and transformation. Just then, Grant appeared beside her. He had a meeting in a few minutes, but he always took time to check in with her, even on the busiest of days. "You okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Emily smiled, feeling the warmth of his gaze. "I'm more than okay," she said, her heart full. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Grant's smile was gentle as he reached out and took her hand. "I'm glad," he said softly. "You've come a long way, Emily, and I'm proud of you." Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't out of sadness. It was out of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to rebuild, for the chance to be loved and understood. She had never imagined that this was where she would be. She had never imagined that someone like Grant would see her for who she truly was. Not just the woman who had been through hardships, but the woman who had the strength to rise above them. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Grant continued their work with the foundation, but now, it was no longer just about business. It was about their shared vision of creating a better world, one where people didn't just survive, but thrived. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew they could face them together. Emily's heart was no longer heavy with doubt. She had found her place in the world, and more importantly, she had found her family. Not just the family she had always dreamed of, but the family she had built along the way. The love between her and Grant had grown, and while they still had their individual journeys to take, they now walked through life side by side. One evening, as they sat in the living room of Grant's apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Grant turned to Emily with a look of quiet determination. "Emily, I've been thinking," he began, his voice serious but soft. "We've come so far, and I feel like we're just getting started. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building something even bigger, something that will last long after we're gone." Emily's heart raced as she turned to face him, her breath caught in her throat. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant smiled, the warmth of his gaze making her chest swell with emotion. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I want to marry you, Emily." The room seemed to fade away, and for a moment, it was just the two of them. Emily felt a rush of love and gratitude, but also a sense of peace. This was the beginning of something new, something that wasn't just about building a foundation, but about building a life together. As she looked into his eyes, she knew that this was where she was meant to be. The future no longer felt uncertain. It felt full of possibility. And with Grant by her side, Emily knew that anything was possible. They had created something extraordinary together, and now, they were ready to take the next step, together, as partners in life, in love, and in everything that lay ahead.